Hello and welcome to this odd edition of Halcyon Razor Review. I'm your host, Lauren Risley. The reason why it's odd is because I'm not going to be reviewing a game or a movie or even previewing a movie or a game or a television series or a book or some kind of media. Let's talk about Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. Why? I don't think a podcast did my story justice. And the reason for it is because I think that people are going to be duped by this by this event, and I kind of want to just make the point very clear as to where I stand on this issue and hopefully give people food for thought in terms of how they're going to digest this event. Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather is an amalgamation of the MMA community represented by Conor McGregor and the boxing community represented by Floyd Mayweather Jr. The idea is that Floyd Mayweather, a retired boxer who's now into his 40s, is going to be taking on a young upstart in the form of Conor McGregor. The main selling point for this fight is that Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather both have the biggest mouths in their respective sports, and both have this kind of magnetism around them whereby people just gravitate towards them because of how big dicks they are. However, the reason why I'm doing it as a Halcyon Razor review is because I can break down into three core components about what I think we need to be talking about, which is the hype for the fight itself, and what the ramifications of the fight will be going forward for the future. This is inspired to a certain extent as well by the Neymar situation, i.e. the transfer of Neymar from Barcelona to PSG, and the kind of ramifications that will have, given it will have some pretty large ramifications that I don't think people are really understanding or appreciating it yet. So, in this episode of Halcyon Razor Review, let's preview the Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather Jr. boxing match.
McGregor, Mayweather, face off!
All right, boys, let's wrap it. 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 Let's wrap it.
Okay, so let's start with the hype of this fight. If you weren't on social media over the course of the last month or two, you will have missed the world tour that was going around basically previewing this fight for the world. And what you would have seen would have been a smorgasbord of profanity, the odd smattering of homophobia and racism, and two individuals just going about their business trying to A, feed their egos, and B, perpetuate a narrative. And what is this narrative, you might ask? The narrative is that Conor McGregor has an opportunity to win. Well, surely that's every fight, Lorne, you ask. Well, not so much. Most fights, it's a question of skill. It's that both fighters represent a puzzle for the other. And it's a question of who's going to figure out the respective puzzle first and overcome the physical endurance of a fight, i.e. pummeling the other guy into submission. Now, the problem with the Floyd Mayweather fight is not so much a question of his skill, but the question of his opponent. What does his opponent bring to the table that's different from every other opponent? Not different from the last one or maybe the last one before that. Every other opponent. Why? Because Floyd Mayweather is undoubtedly, I see a lot of people dancing around this subject a lot. Let's not beat around the bush. He is the greatest defensive fighter in the world. What do I mean by that? Well, he is an individual that has made a living off of being a heel, i.e. people pay to see him lose. They don't want to see Floyd Mayweather win. The vast majority of people that paid to see Pacquiao fight him was in the hope that Pacquiao would be the one to put him down finally. After that fight, the interest waned because it was the general belief that there was no one in the world who had the physical capability, the skill, the speed, and the credibility, yet was unknown enough for Floyd Mayweather to take the fight without really understanding what kind of an opponent he faced. Now, I'm a proponent that there's only maybe one or two people that I think could have beaten Floyd Mayweather. One of them, which might surprise a lot of people, is Amir Khan. Despite the fact that he has a bit of a questionable chin and he has very questionable decision-making skills, in terms of hand speed and in terms of technical ability, there's very few that actually come close to Amir Khan. And he's got a fair bit of power. However, very cannily avoided that Mayweather. Mayweather promised him a fight prior to the Pacquiao fight. And like I say, I think there's a very good reason for that. Mayweather maybe thought that his hand speed would give him a problem. He outpoints opponents. And a lot of times he allures people in with the promise that this opponent is great. And this fight is no different. What you're seeing in a lot of the promos for this fight is Mayweather talking himself up to an extent, but also selling how he's not the fighter he was. He's missing a step. He's got to knock this guy out to prove something. No, not really. Mcgregor, on the other hand, is doing everything he can to prove he's a monster. He's just had Paulie Malignaggi come in as a former two-time world champion in an attempt to try and bring some credibility to his boxing attire, having had no professional fights prior to this one, in an attempt to try and sell the ability that he's an unproven commodity. Mayweather doesn't know what he's getting in for. He's facing a southpaw who's bigger than him and younger than him and stronger than him and is completely unpredictable. Okay, it's a nice idea. In fact, it's great. It sounds like a $300 million idea, doesn't it? The other thing I'm noticing about the hype of this fight is that a lot of people estimated it would do tremendous numbers, ridiculous numbers, 5 million buys plus. What I'm hearing though from various outlets across the world is that there is still tickets available for this fight. Well, that doesn't sound like that big of a deal, Lorne. No, let's put this in context. For the Pacquiao-Mayweather fight, people were literally remortgaging their homes to buy tickets to go see this fight. You couldn't buy tickets for this fight at face value. It was impossible. People sold out those tickets within a ridiculously short amount of time, and their resale value skyrocketed because of the demand of the resale value of the tickets. This fight, on the other hand, not so much. I mean, it'll be a packed house come fight night, but the level of interest in this fight seems to have teetered off when people actually had a moment to sit down and go, wouldn't it be great if Mayweather fought McGregor? That would be a really great fight. I think it'd be really interesting. Now, a month or so down the line, having taken an opportunity to look into the situation, I think people are starting to realise, actually no, this is a very silly idea. We perhaps shouldn't be doing this. But nevertheless, we'll press on. So the point I just wanted to make around the hype of the fight is two things. Number one, it has lowered the bar considerably in terms of what you can get away with a press event. Boxing already didn't have a great reputation in terms of press events, because in no other sport in the world would it be even remotely acceptable for an opponent to start a scuffle, fight, throw things, bite an opponent, anything like that. But in boxing they get away with it all the time. Why? Because it's hype, brah. And MMA is no different. The amount of expletives that are in MMA and the rationale that it's a man's sport. It's a man's sport. If you can't handle that, you're not a man. Urgh. I'm sorry, there's a time and a place for expletives. To emphasise a point, fair enough, but in a professional capacity there's never an excuse for it. I'm sorry, but that's just something that you do to carry yourself socially to a certain standard. And in this press event, there were N-bombs. There was swearing every other sentence. Like I said, there were racial and homophobic slurs. There was almost a fight. Almost. And it was one of those things where you can't show this, you can't inspire a new generation of boxers and MMA fighters to do this, because I wouldn't feel comfortable showing kids this. It was a horrific event in terms of the way that boxing perceives that it has to sell itself these days. And unfortunately, because even if this event isn't as successful as it hopes to be, it will still be a ridiculously successful event. If it doesn't match or surpass Pacquiao's figures with Mayweather, it will certainly come close. And that isn't necessarily a good thing for the sport, considering that AJ Klitschko, they carried themselves with the utmost decency and respect, and the fight was fantastic. I was so up for seeing Klitschko AJ second fight. Alas, Klitschko's retired, and that's the way it goes. But in terms of the hype for this fight, it does a great job of getting people invested, but it's also doing a great job of fooling people in terms of what the outcome of the fight will be, and more importantly, trying to get people to part with cash for a fight they're pitching, but will never happen in terms of, is this going to be a competitive bout? No! Of course it isn't! So, with that in mind, let's turn to the fight itself.
Joe, not just fighting, the biggest star in the world today.
Well, he's most certainly the biggest star in MMA.
Game face on now.
The underlying currency.
Look at this. He's going to
wearing a Mexican hat.
Independence Weekend.
And wearing the colors of the Mexican flag.
Oh, you have to
and
love
there's
it.
probably 7,000 or 8,000 Mexican nationals here, and they're booing already.
He wants to engage them in a negative way to derive energy from it, to show he's not intimidated by the fact it's Mexican Independence Weekend.
Diego Corrales, Carlos Famous Hernandez, Jesus Chavez, Jose Castillo. He beat DeMarcus Chop Chop Corley, Arturo Gotti, Shambe Mitchell, Zab Judah, Carlos Valdemir. All, many of them world champions, I'll say.
Yes.
Many of them world champions.
And so, we come to the fight. What do I mean by the fight? Well, this is what's going to happen, ladies and gentlemen. In preparation for this, I've gone back and I've watched a lot of the archives in terms of full fights with Mayweather. The reason for this is because, well, twofold. Number one, HBO and Showtime have a really great archive of previous fights that are available free to watch whenever you want on YouTube. So you can watch the entirety of the fight without any hype attached to it and with full context, because they obviously give you breakdowns with the tail of the tape prior. So you get weight, reach, height, age, all that jazz. You also get to see them in context in terms of where they were in their careers at the time. The specific one that I'm referring to is De La Hoya versus Mayweather, which a lot of people argue is the closest that Mayweather ever came to losing. I'd argue slightly differently, but nevertheless we digress. McGregor's is harder to track because, of course, the archives for the MMA, for UFC, I should say, are slightly more guarded because, of course, they're not quite on the level of boxing in terms of generating revenue to that same heights. They can generate revenue consistency because they put on shows every other fucking week. But nevertheless, it's harder to get a hold of fights of McGregor because they're so recent and because they were so lucrative. Nevertheless, McGregor's his first fight with Diaz is on there, a few others with Alvarez and also Jose Aldo, even though that one's not really worth watching. To compare and contrast their styles and to see what their mannerisms are. Now, of course, people are going to argue that McGregor is going to adapt his style to a more boxing-friendly style. You know, he boxes, well, when you say boxes, he fights with his hands down more often than not. Quite a wide stance and obviously further away. But when I say wide stance, wide for MMA. For a boxing stance, it's actually very narrow. Stands on his feet a lot. Now, you can argue that this is to his benefit. With the fight with De La Hoya, Mayweather struggled in the earlier rounds because De La Hoya was putting him on the ropes and consistently just throwing shots to the midsection just to try and really get some damage in nice and early to weaken the body and hopefully help him drop his guard while he's compensating. A good body shot will often do that to a boxer. They'll clinch up a lot more and they'll find it a lot more difficult to throw shots because, of course, of the pain emanating from their core, which is where a lot of boxing power comes from. Comes a lot from the deltoids and the traps and things of that nature. That's why you see them so developed. But more often than not, the core helps them being able to lay in that power in order to be able to transmit it from the shoulder to the face. Now, the problem with anything that McGregor can throw it in is that he's faced fighters that have these aspects before. Killer was younger and stronger than him, and some would argue maybe just as technically skilled, if not a little bit slower. Could also take a punch more, which meant that he was willing to walk into more shots to get in range of Mayweather. Mayweather made him look absolutely foolish. Pacquiao, a southpaw, who throws volume punches like you wouldn't, usually out punches his opponents by two or three punches a fight. That's how many punches he throws. Torn rotator cuff or not, Mayweather made him look foolish. There's no combination of fighter that you can put in front of me to say, well, what about this, to try and sell McGregor to me. Because Mayweather has fought that caliber of fighter before, and more to the point, he has fought and defeated boxers who have been training their entire lives to be boxers. MMA has to focus on a variety of different tactics and different angles and stances and different abilities. Wrestling, takedowns, judo, jiu-jitsu, boxing, Muay Thai fighting, kickboxing, all these different variants, and they amalgamate into now what is now effectively a style of fighting, MMA fighting. Boxing is so much more focused than that. The angles and the styles vary within boxing, but in terms of an actual application, it's keep your hands up, try not to get hit in the face, and try and hit him in the face. That's kind of it. And Mayweather is the commensurate master of this. If we're going to put this in a frame that my nerd companions can understand, Mayweather is about as close to Palpatine as it's possible to get. And Luke Skywalker is Conor McGregor, the loud upstart who's come in with a green thing and thinks he fucking knows better than the two dudes who've been doing this for 20 years. It really is that kind of disparity in terms of, well, yes, he's got a lot of potential, and yes, he's done a lot of good shit, but he's not on the same level. He's not even in the same league. It's not a competition, it's an exhibition, it's an event, it's a spectacle. That's all this is. And in terms of a fight and in terms of an outcome, here's what is going to happen. Mayweather will stay on the outside, boxing, trying to control the center of the ring, flicking out jabs, and then following it up with the duck back and the over the top right hand right into Conor McGregor. And this works more for southpaws than it does for right-handed fighters. Why? Because it means that their guard is a lot wider, which means that he has a better chance of clapping you right in the face or ducking it across and getting you on the chin. McGregor's only real hope, ironically enough, is to mimic that style, because Mayweather has that same weakness. When he throws that over the top right, his guard is completely exposed. And the problem with this is that Mayweather is so fast and his reflexes are so good at popping his head back that no fighter has really been able to expose this, with the exception of one, and that was Shane Mosley. The shots he received in that fight were as close as anyone has ever come to felling him, and as close as anyone has come to exploiting that particular weakness in his attack. If McGregor is smart enough to realise this, he will load up one decent shot to put him on the back foot. But they're both counter punchers. They're both individuals that have got to have the opponent walking towards them in order to knock them out. It never happens otherwise. And so McGregor is left in the regrettable position of being the antagonist in this fight, which doesn't work to his advantage at all. What you're going to see is 12 rounds of McGregor getting in range, trying to go for the body, putting him on the ropes, only to watch Mayweather fire back with a jab over the top right hand and out of danger, controlling the center of the ring. It'll be decision victory. No knockouts to be had here, folks. And why do I think this? Because it's been the same story for every fight Mayweather's had. He doesn't take chances and he's not a risk taker. He's not an entertainer. He's there to fulfill his role as the heel, the person you want to see lose, but you won't, because it makes more money to him if he wins. So, 12 rounds, decision to Mayweather. That's the decision, that's what's going to happen. Now, the ramifications of this. Let's move on and talk about that for a few minutes, shall we?
You do something with that flag, I'll fuck you up. There's about it. That's it. That's it. There's about $5 grand in here. There's about $5 grand in here. Fuck me. Just now you do something with that flag. You ain't getting this bag, all this money back. I'm gonna fuck you up on this stage.
And so, we come to the reason why I'm making this video. It's not to shout about how much I know about boxing because I was right about the decision, which I will be, by the way. It's not even to talk about the social ramifications of having two well-known individuals in broad daylight in the middle of the day just effing and jeffing for no other reason than we fucking can! Good for you, I guess, but do you really need to drop the F-bomb every 3 seconds? Really? Really though? It's the ramifications that this fight will have for not only MMA and boxing, but for sport in general. This fight will generate a lot of income. And it's sad because Mayweather has looked at the situation as a whole and decided that the only way he can generate the kind of income that can break the record is by going against pretty much every rule that there is in terms of boxing. He's fighting an individual that shouldn't have been granted his boxing license to begin with, shouldn't have been sanctioned by the Nevada State Athletic Commission because, of course, he's a novice fighting the best fighter of his generation. And there's no fines or penalties for both of them acting like complete twats in the interim. This now gives license to pretty much anyone else who wants to promote a fight or event in the same manner. And this means a devolution in terms of the product that we receive. It means we have less and less class in our sport. We get less and less people that actually embody the values and the traits that we should be looking up to. These guys, foul-mouthed, poorly behaved, so lacking in discipline and respect, are going to be revered after this fight, because win or lose, both of them are going to make a ridiculous amount of money and go down in history as one of the premier events in all of sport. And I really worry about that. We've seen recently with PSG's acquisition of Neymar that team mentality and respect for sport doesn't exist and hasn't existed for a while, but that really was one of the last straws where money overrid everything. It overrid contractual obligation. It overrid the rights and wrongs of the law within sport. It overrid a team sense of decency when it said, look, we have put together the best team in the world. And now an individual has decided, yeah, but sod that, I want more money. And I don't care whatever excuse they want to level at me. I understand as a human being, with a finite amount of time to be able to earn money in this world, that the allure of money can be a tough one to turn down. And what I would say to anyone who's hoping to partake in this fight is enjoy it for what it's worth. Okay, I certainly will be. I'll be watching the fight. But try your best to take into consideration the ramifications if you could choose to continue to consume this kind of genre, if that makes sense, in terms of a lot of people making a lot of noise for no other reason than, because when you break it down, it's no different than anything else. It's just a boxing match. That's it. Boil it down to its core components, and that's it. It's just the level of interest here that separates it from normal fights. And I'd argue that if we continue down this road of rewarding people for the worst of behaviour, that seems to be systemic in all aspects of society these days, and we'll talk about this in a weekly show installment coming out soon, that I worry that we're all going to be the worst for it, and the only people that are going to win are the people we should be admonishing for that behaviour. We should have all stood up in unison and been outraged by that kind of press conference and by the fact that we're being sold this pile of crap as a competitive fight when it really, really isn't. It's intriguing, it's interesting, but ultimately it's an insult to every single person that buys this fight under the pretense of it being something that is inherently good for the sport, good for you as a viewer looking to seek entertainment, and good for the future generations of people looking to get into boxing and MMA. So thank you very much for watching this episode of the Halcyon Razor Review. Please like, share and subscribe. I've been your host, Lon Risley. Comment in the section below to tell me how wrong I am and how much I've droned on and on about something that really shouldn't be droned on about, because there's already so much content on this. Like I give a damn, it's my channel, I'll do whatever the hell I want, so... in the meantime, please check out some of the other content and some of the other content creators below. If you want to see me check out any other sporting events, usually I'm covering them on my podcast, so be sure to check those out. I know they're a little bit longer than most of my other episodes, but again, my channel, I'll do whatever the hell I like. So, thank you very much for watching this episode. Take care of yourselves, whatever you do. Enjoy the fight if you do watch it, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.
But don't fuck with the best, see that'll get you pissed on. Like pregnancy tests, it's the money team. I can't stop with a million, I say no homo, I'm finna call me a billion.